My name is Nyla Dolores Nelson. I was born December 24th, Christmas Eve, 1927, in Sioux County, Iowa, about probably 10 to 12 miles out of Hudson, South Dakota. I wish that I had asked more questions about things like that. But when I was growing up, I didn't care. I was here and moving around and everything was fine, I figured. But yeah, I was born premature, probably several months premature. And I don't even know what I weighed, but they didn't think I weighed much. And my aunt said to her, I looked like a little bird without feathers. Kind of homely, evidently. But the doctor set me aside because my mother was so sick, and he took care of her. Well, my grandmother, whose farm we lived on, was there as the midwife, and she took care of me. I'm not sure anymore, but I understood that they wrapped me in cotton and put me in a cigar box and put me in or near the warming oven of the stove. Now, my sister says she remembers not a cigar box, but a shoe box, and that they set me on the sewing machine up above the kitchen. The heat would come up, and the sewing machine sat right there. That was also a bedroom where my mom and dad slept. And she says she remembers me being on that sewing machine where the heat would come up. So I'm not sure, but I got along, and here I am, 92 years old.
Yeah.
No, and they evidently didn't bother to weigh or anything. I think the doctor figured I was going to die anyway, so he didn't bother with me. But my grandma evidently wasn't going to give up until she had to.
Yeah.
I ruined their Christmas, I think, that year. I don't remember any special toys, but I somehow in the back of my mind, I don't know if it was for Christmas or for my birthday or a combination being at the same time, but I remember receiving 7 dolls. Now, we were poor, and we did not get many gifts, but I did have aunts and uncles that would come and see us at Christmas, and I figured they must have brought a lot of this stuff. But And I do not remember having 7 dolls to play with. I just remember that in the back of my mind. But when I was probably 4, maybe 5, I might have been going to kindergarten, I do remember loving to read. I love books, and I read so much of the time. In fact, this little boy that lived next door to us, they treated him quite mean, really. But I liked him. He was older than I was, but he could not read or didn't seem to know anything about books. And we would sit out on the curb by our house here in Sioux Falls, and I would read to him, and then I would try to teach him words. And whether he ever learned to read that way or not, I don't know. But I think books would have been considered my favorite. No, I don't really remember. I would read or look at the pictures of any book I could get a hold of. I don't know at that time if we got books from a library or if it was just books my family had. I suppose it was kids' books, but I would look at any books I could get a hold of. Well, we did. I imagine most of the time we were all together by nighttime. The kids, of course, we had to go to school. My dad worked. I do remember, though, there were 2 years, and I'm not sure if it was somewhere when I was between 1 and 7 probably, that my dad could not work. He had something at the time, I think they called it rheumatism, but it would be like arthritis or something like that. But I remember he spent most of the time in bed, and my mother would soak his legs and feet in, I'm not sure, I don't think it was Epsom salts. I don't think that smells, but it was some kind of salts that stunk the whole house up. But we had to put up with it because that's what they used in those days. But he was home, and then later when he had a trucking service, then I think everyone would be home by supper time. So we would have our supper, and really, I don't remember an awful lot about sitting in the house, but our yard was all dirt in the front yard, but it was the neighborhood playing yard. All the neighbor kids came over, and we would play games. I didn't always get to because I was the youngest, and a lot of times I would have to sit with my mom and dad, but they would be out sitting, watching all the games being played. If my sister was here, she could tell you a lot more about the different games and what all they played. But besides the games, the yard being all dirt, that was really a good place for the boys to play with their cars, make roads and all this and that. And when I was old enough, either my sisters and I, or maybe it was some of the neighbor kids, would play jacks a lot. And what else? We'd play marbles, but mostly the boys did that. I always wanted to get in on it, and they wouldn't always let me. And we also had a big garden in the back of our house. And I imagine my dad made the rest of the family get out there and hoe and weed and all that. I never had to. I was the youngest, so I got out of a lot of that. But I do remember my folks bringing in vegetables from the garden. I think a lot of our meals were from our own garden. Not really. As a teenager, I probably would have, but my dad by that time had moved to Milwaukee, and I was back here for, well, I guess it was at the end of my freshman year. My sisters and I moved to Milwaukee to be with my dad. And he never got after me much for anything. I think I was sort of his spoiled brat. But everyone babied me when I was a kid. All of my family did. And my mother was sick an awful lot of the time. She had pneumonia so much of the time. And I spent more time with my oldest sister, Lorraine. She more or less watched me, took care of me, and all that. The oldest was Lester, and I must have been about 10 years younger than him. Lorraine was next, and I was 8 years younger than her. Then my brother, Merle, and probably 6 years younger than him. And then my younger sister, she was older than I was, close to 5 years older. She was the other one in the family, and then me. And that was the kids, 5 of us. I don't think I would ever dared. My mother, she was a quiet little person, and I do not remember a whole lot. She died when I was was I 8 or 9? One of those ages. And I don't ever remember talking back to her. My dad, I would have never, he babied me, and he was so good to me. But I knew better than to ever say anything back. And when he got mad at us kids, any time during our lives, he would look at us and he would say, "I'll knock you to a peak and knock your peak off." And boy, that was enough to scare me. I wouldn't have dared say anything to him. Well, I think actually my dad, because of my mother being quiet and being sick so much of the time, I just remember being with my dad probably more, and then my mother dying when I was so young. Well, then it was my dad or my sisters helping me with things during my life. I believe so, but probably not until I was older. I can't remember as a little child. And even if it did, we were poor. I never realized that, but we were poor, and we probably wouldn't have afforded it. But probably, I know when I got older, like in my early teens or maybe a few years before that, we would go out to my girlfriends and I, and my sisters sometimes, would go out to the fair that we have here every year. And we would always, every year, we'd pack a lunch, go out early in the day, and spend time. We didn't spend a lot of money. I doubt if we even took in the rides, but we looked at all the animals and looked at all the displays of things and just enjoyed the day. And then, years ago, nobody ever worried that we shouldn't be out there alone. We were fine out there. And we would come, and I imagine we walked home, which was quite a long walk. We, at that time, probably lived on 14th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, maybe. So walking from there way out to the fairgrounds, it was a long ways, but we walked wherever we went in those days. I did. I had a couple of them. Miss Jelinek, when I went to Beadle School, she was my teacher. It would have been 5th or 6th grade. Those were the 2 grades that I went to Beadle School. So she was one of the grades. I don't remember which, but I really liked her so well. I've often wondered what happened to her in life. I know she had a boyfriend, and toward the end of the time before I switched over to Longfellow School, we had to go there for our 7th and 8th grade. She was talking about getting married, so I have wondered during my life how she turned out, if she married, how many kids she had. And then when I think that was when I might have been a freshman at Washington High School. What was his Stan? His first name was Stan McCormick. He was my algebra teacher. All of us girls liked him. I don't quite remember what he looked like now, but we must have thought he was cute. But I was good at algebra, and he was just an easy guy to learn from, so he was my other favorite teacher. I don't think I did. I was evidently very lucky, or I was very careful. I don't know which, but I do not remember having anything serious. I might have got a few scrapes on my knees or something, but nothing bad happened to me. Oh, I'm sure we did. I can remember we went to the park sometimes. I cannot remember when I was real little. I can't remember doing anything special other than going to the park. And I'm sure when I got a little older, I don't specifically remember places, but I'm just sure we must have went a few, maybe to a farm, something like that. I never worried about gifts or money, and so I do not remember thinking much of any of that. Now, we must have had Sunday school programs. We went to First Lutheran downtown for Sunday school. But do you know, I do not remember ever being in a program. The only thing I remember from First Lutheran really is that's where I was confirmed from. But surely we must have had, in school, we must have had Christmas programs, but I don't remember any of that. The main thing I liked to do when I was a little bit older, probably around 10 or so, us girls would roller skate. We didn't have shoe skates. We had the kind you put over your shoes. But we roller skated all around town. And nobody worried about us. We'd roller skate downtown, in and out of the stores, and just all over. And that was, I think, our main form of entertainment, other than in the summer when we walked over to Drake Springs, and we would spend the whole days over there during the summer swimming.